Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources and extract the essential knowledge. Today, we're looking at a pretty significant piece of policy, Executive Order 42154.
That's right. Signed January 20th, 2025, popped up in the Federal Register on the 29th, and the title really says it all. Unleashing American Energy.
Yeah, it does. And for our sources today, we've got the full text right from the Federal Register. Also, the American Presidency Project has it. And we've pulled some background from the White House website as well.
So our mission really is to get under the hood of this order. What are its main parts? What could it actually mean for energy policy here in the U.S.?
Okay, let's start with the why presented in the order itself. Section 1 kind of lays out the thinking. It says America has, vast energy resources.
And that historically, these resources were really key to economic strength. But the order argues recent regulations have held things back.
It calls them burdensome and ideologically motivated regulations. That's the specific language used.
And it connects those regulations to, well, a bunch of negative impacts. Things like electricity costing more, fewer jobs being created.
Right. Higher energy costs impacting families, how we get around, even food production. It frames the whole thing as a national security issue, too.
Exactly. So that sets the stage for the main policy goals, which are laid out in Section 2.
First up is encouraging energy exploration and production. We're talking federal lands, federal waters, even the outer continental shelf.
The stated goal here is pretty ambitious, making the U.S. a dominant global energy player, again, for the long haul.
And right alongside that, there's a push for non-fuel minerals. Think rare earths.
Yeah, becoming a leader in producing and processing those. The order links this directly to jobs, strengthening supply chains, ours, and our allies, and cutting reliance on what it calls malign and adversarial states.
Makes sense. Then there's ensuring reliable, plentiful energy everywhere in the U.S. states, territories, all linked back to economic and national security.
And another key point, making sure energy rules are grounded in, quote, clearly applicable law.
Okay, now here's a part that's gotten a lot of attention. Eliminating the so-called electric vehicle mandate.
Right. The idea is boosting consumer choice for vehicles. So removing regulatory hurdles, maybe even ending state emissions waivers that could limit gas car sales.
And potentially scrapping subsidies that specifically favor EVs. The argument is about leveling the playing field, letting the market decide, essentially.
And that focus on consumer choice doesn't stop at cars. It extends to, like, everyday appliances.
Yeah, light bulbs, dishwashers, gas stoves, water heaters, things like that. Promoting market competition, innovation.
There's also a specific instruction about how agencies should analyze the impact of regulations.
Oh yeah, the global effects have to be reported separately from the domestic costs and benefits.
The idea being to prioritize American interests in regulatory decisions.
The section also stresses the importance of public input, peer-reviewed science in agency actions.
And making sure federal money isn't spent in ways that contradict these new principles unless the law absolutely requires it.
Okay, let's shift to Section 3. This is where we start seeing some immediate actions mandated.
Agency heads are basically told, go look at all your existing rules and actions.
Specifically, anything that might be, in their view, unduly burdening domestic energy development. Oil, gas, coal, hydro, biofuels, minerals, nuclear, the whole list.
And also anything inconsistent with this new policy, like rules restricting vehicle or appliance choices.
And they didn't get much time, did they?
No, just 30 days to come up with plans. They need to work with OMB, the Budget Office, and the NEC, the National Economic Council.
To figure out how to potentially suspend, revise, or just get rid of these rules.
And agencies have to loop in the Attorney General about these steps.
Which could mean the AG gets involved in related lawsuits, maybe asking courts to hit pause while these rules are reconsidered.
Exactly. Now, Section 4, this one's a biggie. It outright revokes 12 specific executive orders.
12. All issued between 2021 and 2023, and they cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, things like climate change policy, environmental protection, science advice, climate-related refugee issues, financial risk from climate change.
Clean cars and trucks, federal sustainability goals, protecting forests, parts of the Inflation Reduction Act related to energy, environmental justice. It's a significant rollback.
A very broad sweep. And it doesn't stop with just revoking orders. It also terminates the American Climate Corps immediately.
Like right away. All activities, programs, operations done.
And the timeline was incredibly fast. The Secretary of the Interior had just one single day from the order's date, to send a letter ending the agreement that set up the Climate Corps.
Wow. And everyone involved was expected to agree in writing promptly.
And the order covers the practical side too. What happens to the leftover money, the assets, the contracts associated with these now gone programs and entities? They have to be redirected or disposed of legally.
Okay, moving on. Section 5 turns to permitting, making it faster, more efficient.
A key move here is revoking another older executive order, EO 12091 from 1977, President Carter's era.
That one dealt with the Council on Environmental Quality, CEQ, and how it implements NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act.
Right. NEPA is the big law requiring environmental impact assessments for major federal actions. EO 1991 was actually meant to streamline that process back then.
So revoking it now signals a different direction for environmental reviews.
Definitely. And the order directs the CEQ chair to issue new NEPA guidance within 30 days and even propose scrapping the existing CEQ regulations entirely.
Then a working group gets formed to revise agency-specific rules to match this new direction.
And the priority is explicitly stated. Speed up permit approvals, meet deadlines from the Fiscal Responsibility Act, efficiency and certainty are the watchwords.
For projects deemed really important national economy, national security, the order says agencies should use basically all tools available.
Including emergency powers, if needed, to fast-track permits.
It also suggests Congress should step in to make permitting easier for energy projects crossing state lines and streamline court challenges related to NEPA.
Now, Section 6 gets into the details of environmental analysis, specifically targeting the social cost of carbon.
It says agencies should only stick to environmental requirements explicitly written in laws when making decisions. No extra considerations.
And it disbands the Interagency Working Group, the IWG, that calculated the social costs of greenhouse gases, all their guidance, reports, estimates withdrawn.
Just to remind listeners, the social cost of carbon tries to put a dollar figure on the long-term damage done by emitting 1 extra ton of CO2.
Right. And this executive order is highly critical of that calculation. It calls it logically flawed, based on weak science, politicized, and lacking a legal basis.
The argument is that using it slows things down and hurts U.S. competitiveness.
So the EPA administrator gets 60 days to issue new guidance addressing these criticisms, potentially even eliminating the use of the social cost metric altogether.
And in the meantime,
agencies are told to align their greenhouse gas valuations with existing OMB guidance on regulatory analysis, Circular A4, but only where that's legally allowed.
there's also a tight deadline, 30 days, for the EPA, working with others, to give recommendations to OMB about the endangerment finding.
Ah, yes, the finding under the Clean Air Act that determined greenhouse gases threaten public health and welfare, a cornerstone of climate regulation. They need to reassess its legality and applicability.
Okay, Section 7. The title here is pretty direct, Terminating the Green New Deal. Though it doesn't actually mention that term in the operational text, it targets specific legislation.
Right. It immediately pauses funds going out from the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, specifically for energy and infrastructure projects. EV charging stations get a specific mention.
This pause for a review, correct, to see if these programs align with this new energy policy.
Exactly. Agencies have 90 days to report back to OMB and the NEC. And importantly, no money in these categories gets released until OMB and the NEC sign off, based on the review's recommendations.
The section also talks about federal purchasing, prioritizing cost effectiveness, American workers, sensible use of taxpayer money.
And it tells agencies to think about using their enforcement discretion, basically, how strictly they enforce existing rules to help advance this new energy policy.
Section 8 brings us to national security, specifically related to LNG, liquefied natural gas.
Yes, the Secretary of Energy is told to restart the review process for LNG export applications quickly, considering economic impacts, jobs, and importantly, the security of U.S. allies.
What about deepwater ports for LNG exports?
For ports already approved, but where changes are proposed, MARAD, the Maritime Administration, has set timelines to review those changes. The main question is whether the changes would cause seriously different negative environmental effects compared to what was originally approved.
Got it. And then Section 9, the final big policy push, restoring America's mineral dominance.
This mirrors the energy side. Agencies need to find and change or kill rules that unduly burden domestic mining and processing of non-fuel minerals.
This involves looking at withdrawals of public land from mining, potentially updating the critical minerals list, maybe adding uranium.
Prioritizing mapping where these minerals are, and considering federal support for critical mineral projects.
It also tasks the U.S. Trade Representative and Commerce Secretary with looking at what other countries are doing mineral-wise and the security risks of relying on them.
Homeland Security is directed to assess forced labor in mineral imports. Defense needs to check the national defense stockpile for critical minerals. It's comprehensive.
There's also a call for a report on boosting U.S. mining competitiveness and using channels like the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue to advance mineral interests.
Finally, Section 10 is mostly standard legal stuff.
Right, the general provisions. Clarifies the order doesn't override existing agency legal authority or OMB functions. Implementation depends on law and funding.
And crucially, it states the order doesn't create any enforceable rights for anyone against the government. Standard boilerplate for EOs.
So if we step back and look at the whole thing, Executive Order 15144 is clearly a major pivot on energy policy.
Absolutely. You see a really strong drive for energy independence, developing domestic resources, rolling back a lot of recent environmental and climate initiatives.
And a huge emphasis on streamlining regulations, all viewed through the lens of economic and national security for both energy and minerals.
And the immediate actions, it kicks off that big review of existing rules, ending the climate core practically overnight. They really signal a sense of urgency to implement these changes.
It certainly leaves you thinking about that fundamental tension, doesn't it?
Mm.
Between pushing for energy development and resource extraction and environmental protection concerns.
Definitely. How that balance, reflected so differently in this order compared to the ones it revoked, will play out in American policy and, its global ripple effects.
Mhm.
That's the big question going forward. Makes you want to track how those agency reviews actually unfold.